Very, very good evening, everyone. Charles here, further on Daily Chart Analysis. The time just approaching 20 minutes past 9 here, local in Milan. Thursday, the 23rd of April, 2026. And what a beautiful trading day we had. Pretty much everything in terms of forecast played out to perfection in some way or another. I will give the crown to the DXY. And why I say that is because overwhelmingly, if I head to the forecast as I always do, those many hours ago, where were we? 14 hours ago, 15 hours ago, 15. Here we are. All right, so this morning, 14 hours ago, what was the title? Daily 50 MA rejection or the gap fill. Right, so where price was, of course, weekly time frame, top right hand chart. I am expecting for price to want to push off that one and only final weekly order block within the point of interest that I'm honing on that chart, weekly time frame. We can understand at that point now, approaching the markets today as a result of even yesterday's long position on US dollar CAD. The good reason for that long position was the mere fact that we had finally closed above that miniature range on that 4-hour time frame. So of course on the DXY, after a higher high, expecting that higher low for a higher high continuation, and that's exactly what we got. And that's why I mean, in terms of the forecast, everything seemed to play out to perfection. However, what we can see is just because we have indeed broken above a 4-hour 50 MA, it doesn't necessarily mean, that the trend itself on the DXY has completely turned around. Hence why the title, Daily 50 EMA Rejection or the Gap Fill. And I thought it was going to be one or the other today. We haven't pushed as high as I would like, but kind of secretly, I had the expectation that was going to be the play tomorrow, as price will then look to trend up towards that market gap fill in towards that weekly 50 MA, and I foresee then price will close in between that weekly and the daily 50 MA, somewhere in and around that region. That would make absolute sense, and as price was going to get up there, price is going to want to gravitate towards filling that market gap. Anyhow, in terms of the lower time frames, as you can see by the illustrations, I'm literally understanding that price now on the 15-minute time frame, then of course will follow through to the 4 daily, then the weekly at some point in time. We have begun that trend towards the upside. As you can see, my multiple breaks of structure, I got the first clue yesterday, hence the DXY, hence the US dollar CAD long. It's a clue by way of the 15 minutes starting to break structure points. However, at that time, we hadn't had that closure above on that 4-hour time frame. So the great news is, approaching the markets 14 hours ago, not only had we broken above that range, we'd also broken above the 4-hour 50 MA, looking for price then, of course, after that higher high to want to pull back into that 4-hour 50 MA before continue its move towards the upside. So that's what the forecast was on the DXY. So of course, you then say, well, Charles, what does that mean? Well, if I'm expecting DXY strength to come into the market, my focus then becomes on those cross pairs, US dollar CAD, GBPUSD, AUDUSD, Euro USD, to see if I can take aggressive or even patient sells. And when I talk about aggressive, I'm always, okay, not always, more often than not, 8 times out of 10, I am looking for at least a 1-minute break of structure, if not a bearish engulfing 15-minute candle from an area. Very, very rarely am I taking limit orders these days as a result of being more full-time than part-time in trading. Therefore, I don't see the need to have to take limit orders. I will at least wait for a 1-minute break of structure anyhow. Far too much information for you guys. So today, my real focus, I was looking at continued shorts on GJ. I shorted GJ yesterday, and that, unfortunately, my first attempt at shorting GJ ended up in a break-even trade after price actually pushed very, very nicely towards my desired area. However, it didn't get there, so I just let the trade play out to see what was going to happen. GJ is a very new pair that I'm actively testing. So pretty much, as I've said to those specifics, well, not those specific to the people that kind of pay attention to what I have to say, I can't mention that here on TradingView. Instead of back testing and spending all of that time going over old data, I'm actively testing this at a very low percentage to see whether my trading model, my trading strategy is applicable to GJ. I have no doubt that that it is. However, I personally haven't traded GJ for a very, very, very long time. So before I place this out to those who pay gentle attention to what I have to say, it's up to me to actively test GJ in the live market. So that's what I've done. And as a result of that, I have since dropped Euro GBP from my watch list because, well, we won't mention any expletives over here, but GJ, it seems like every time I enter that chain, it just does absolutely nothing. And then it just takes off in one direction or the other. So, GJ, let's have a look at GJ first and foremost, because that was the trade that we took and it was break even. So you see the beautiful snap in the market. Admittedly, yesterday in terms of marking up GJ, I already marked up the 4 hour and the 15-minute. However, this morning, as you can see, I decided to go higher time frame, full top down analysis to see what we had. And I wanted to understand what the hold up was at these highs on GJ, because evidently we were very bullish, and for whatever reason, price just decided to start stagnating, and in fact gave a bearish engulfing on the weekly time frame. That's a very, very, very powerful thing to notice, or to even happen on the charts, because if I were to clog up the charts incredibly, what we'll see is prices actively in that higher time frame weekly order block, of course, now looking to go short. Hence why I was looking to short GJ. So once that's drawn incorrectly, it was up here. However, just to add a little bit more essence to that, this is something that I don't normally do, but as I've said, I'm actively testing GJ simply by trading it. But as I say, it's not something that I'm monitoring in terms of the monetary value. It's more the application of strategy and whether or not I'm able to apply that. So as you can see here, let me bring that to the left and widen that so you can have a better viewpoint. Those of you that pay attention to the way I trade understand that I enjoy, or I love to use wick imbalances specifically on that weekly and even the daily time frame. I believe the wick is a very powerful concept when you can recognize where that wick is coming from and what that wick has contributed to. So instead of me highlighting a huge order block, what I've done is just put the wick high. And why? Well, on this weekly time frame, very clear to see after that lower low, lower high, lower low. Simple as that. So what I've done, I've used the absolute highest point in that area. If I put a circle around, if you can understand where I'm looking, in that area, the absolute highs of that point, and forget all about order blocks to understand why is price holding up. And if we scoot all the way over, look at that for pinpoint accuracy and perfection. So trading will never lie to you. There is always, always, always a reason for an action or reaction in trading. And I believe I put that down to a lot of my success by not just accepting the results, which of course we are in a business where we cannot forecast the results, but more often than not, there is always a reason to lose. And if you can understand your reasons to lose and put that against your trading confluences that actually build up your bias, you can then be comfortable to lose because you can understand. It then doesn't become me versus the market. It then becomes, right, well, that was pretty much inevitable, but I must take the risk in the trade in order to make money in the long run. So, as I said, wick imbalance all the way from July 2008. And look at that weekly candle last week popped into it absolutely to perfection. And price is now, in my opinion, on the way back down. So once I start to refine all those areas down, I understand what exactly is going on. Forget about the daily time frame for a moment. It's very important on the 4 hour. As you can see, that tremendous bearish engulfing candles here, and here, that left a beautiful 4 hour order block that price has failed to close and break above. So what I was doing is looking to, on the 15-minute time frame, then to refine that area down and have a look to see in terms of action by way of setup criteria first and foremost. So again, evidently GJ can trend up, and evidently GJ can break structures, and evidently GJ can pull back up into a point of interest where I call that a valid point of interest as a result of that move breaking complete structures to the left-hand side. Now, of course, my first position yesterday, clear break of structure, pull back into that area of imbalance. And as I said, that trade was taken pretty much instantaneously, to be honest. Just understanding how GJ moves, I think it's very important when you're looking to trade a new pair. Is GJ going to react to limit orders? In this instance, yes, it has. And unfortunately, didn't reach my target. My target was around a 3%, just minimal risk reward for myself. It didn't work out. Break even trade. This morning, I took another entry after a 1 minute break of structure. Again, applying different entry techniques to GJ to understand what's going on. As you can see, in and around this area, had a beautiful 1 minute break of structure. Took that trade upon the return, and we took that price just out at the equal low, because at that time, price in new day's price action, price hasn't shown me that it's starting to trend. Therefore, I had every expectation that price, in fact, could just return back to the lows of that range. And that's what it did. So an easy 2%. Admittedly, my stop loss placement was slightly higher than I would have liked. However, as a result of this actually contributing to a new high in terms of the most recent price action, the fear was that actually after this high, I'd be looking at a higher low for a higher high continuation that could actually take me out, or better still, just head up to this 15-minute order block, which would be the highest order block in and around that area towards the session high. So figured, allow my stop loss a bit of breathing room for anything that can happen, and then the position was taken out at 2%. So that's GJ. Long time talking about GJ. Nevertheless, in terms of the forecast, that's what we do. We set the plan, set the setup, trade the plan, and it is what it is. Right. So in line with further DXY strength, what else did I trade today? So US dollar CAD, I didn't get any entries on US dollar CAD today, unfortunately. But I'm not sure if I mentioned this already. I closed it out this morning yes, here it is. There we go, daily 50 MA. So held that overnight, and the daily 50 MA on the DXY. So considering I'm using the DXY as my full degree of confluence, I must then bring that into my scan when I'm managing the cross pair, of course involving the US dollar. So once the DXY reached its daily 50 MA, US dollar CAD for me, unfortunately, that was closed out at 3.5% or 3.27%, whatever you like to call it. But again, a very, very nice trade in line with the forecast. So actually, I was then expecting after this higher high for price to want to roll back for the higher low. But unfortunately, price actually got to the full target where I was anticipating. But I can't take credit for that. I did indeed use the DXY as a full confluence, and I was very happy to bank that 3.27% out of the market. Easy money, to be quite honest. Without going through the higher time frame analysis, you can look at a previous video to find out how I look to have taken that. But the moral of the story, a re-entry was not available for me today. Right, something that I did trade today was AUD US dollar. An absolute beautiful trade. I'm not going to go over it full time, but in line with higher time frame bias, expecting the DXY to want to roll to the highs. I've been saying it feels like months and weeks now, or weeks and months rather, that I was expecting after this break of structure on the weekly, we've got that lower low, price come up into the lower high area for the turnaround, lower low back down into that higher time frame weekly 50 MA, long term of course. In the immediacy, looking for the reaction from that area, that's good enough. More than likely the reaction is good enough to push us at least towards break even, or if not, towards take profit. So in the most idyllic of scenarios, you can see what I've drawn here. I would have loved for this to have been a textbook trade. I would have loved at some point today for price to actually break below that 4-hour 50 MA, because of course what we can see is price is very much still bullish at this time. And in fact, price is just ranging, in my opinion, at that 4-hour 50 EMA. So this trade was, I've graded it as a good trade. It's certainly not textbook because I do not have that confirmation on the 4-hour time frame that price is broken below. But what we did have is price actually snapping Asia to, well, again, it's not a textbook trade. For me, it's just a good trade, or average at best. We've had that break of Asia, pull back into an area of imbalance. And if I go to the 1 minute time frame so you can see my application of how I actually look to have taken that trade, pretty much textbook, to be honest. Monitoring 1 minute price action in line with this. Excuse me, still suffering with my allergies. So higher high, higher low, higher high. So technically here becomes, in my opinion, a structure point by way of a key structure point. Now you say, well, Charles, how did you take it? Well, higher low, higher high, break of structure. Now at this point I have a couple of options. Use the 5 minute order block, which is here, or wait for the 1 minute order block. Because I didn't get my break of structure of this key area, it would have been a bit too forceful for me to use the 5-minute order block because my range back down to this area is very limited. However, what I did is wait for price to come back up to the 1-minute order block, right up at these highs. As soon as price tapped into that area, it gave me this beautiful bearish engulfing candle. I set that order just like so, to be honest, after that candle there. And I had around about 4 to 5, in fact, maybe 6 pip stop loss, I do believe. And price just absolutely rolled over in favor. It wasn't 7%, so yeah, here we go. That's the reason why. 6 was around about 6%. So I think that would have been six pips, and then this was slightly lower, around about 6% was the take profit on that. Absolutely, again, not textbook, but a very, very well seen trade. Again, a bit of a risky trade considering price hadn't closed below, as I would have loved it to. However, once you then monitor what was going on in the DXY had then pulled back, looking to, in fact, it was starting to push above the daily 50 MA at that time. It was just a beautiful looking trade to see if we could grab a reaction on AU to finalize the trading day. So end the call there, or end the video there, ladies and gentlemen. I hope, of course, you're able to grab something from that by way of education. If you can take anything from that, again, forecast. You see it over and over and over again. Forecast, have a plan, trade the plan, keep trading, as simple as you possibly can. Until the next time, everyone, all the very best. Do take care of your trading journey. Enjoy your evening, and I'm sure I will. Take care. Charles.